Wait. Before we start, just want to make sure we're clear here. While this podcast talks about sobriety, mental health, and addiction, it is not meant to replace professional medical advice. Welcome to Sisters in Sobriety.
I'm Kathleen.
And I'm Sonia.
And we're ex-sisters-in-law, brought together in marriage and bonded through our sobriety journey.
Join us as we talk sobriety, addiction, and everything in between. You're in for quite a ride. And our Substack is buzzing with amazing content, from creative mocktail recipes to insightful courses and reflective exercises. There is something for everyone. Don't miss out. It's a great way to add some extra joy and depth to your journey. Check it out. Welcome to Sisters in Sobriety. We are thrilled to welcome Melanie Gulde, licensed addiction counselor and co-founder of the Divided Sky Foundation, which is a visionary recovery center in Ludlow, Vermont, created in partnership with Fish guitarist Trey Anastasio, who also happens to be Melanie's former drug court client.
Melanie isn't just known for her clinical skills, but the way she blends joy, connection, and humanity into the recovery process.
This fall, Melanie launched the Women's Scholarship Fund, which addresses the very real barriers women face in seeking treatment.
Melanie, welcome to Sisters in Sobriety. We're so happy you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So, Melanie, can you tell us a little bit about growing up, and when you think back on your early life, were there experiences or people who sort of shaped your sense of empathy and service?
I think that, growing up, I grew up on Long Island. My dad was an elementary school principal, and he always had a sense of kindness to him. And what I learned later in life was that it was always really important to him to get to know every student, every family. And I think that that was something that I could see in him and followed in that path, and seeing people as individuals and not necessarily just as a group.
What first pulled you towards your addiction treatment work and recovery work?
I got sober in 1995, and it was pretty soon thereafter that I realized that this was something that I loved, the idea of staying within the realm of recovery in a helping manner. And so many people helped me unconditionally, and I always was waiting for, what do they want from me? And they didn't want anything. And that was the beauty in it. And I thought that's so much the ultimate in gratitude, is to give without any expectation of anything in return. And so within a couple of years after I got sober, I got my head on straight and I moved away. I was living in Florida at the time. I moved back to New York, and I went back to college, and I kind of felt like I want to do it the right way. And I interned while I was in college at an outpatient clinical facility in Oneonta, New York. And that was just the thing. That was what I felt was my calling. And after I finished my degree, they happened to have a position open, and I stepped right into working right after that. That was in 2000.
So before founding Divided Sky, so between taking that job and now, what were some pivotal roles or experiences that kind of shaped your philosophy around recovery?
I think, I had such great mentors early on, and the lessons they taught me were so invaluable. One of the stories that I love to tell is, as a early counselor, I took something personally that it was a new client who lied to me about a drug test. Go figure. And it was a positive instant test for cocaine. And he swore he did not do cocaine. His probation officer was going to have to find out. And he was saying, it wasn't me. I didn't do it. I don't know what happened. Somebody must have put something in my drink, all of that. And I presented this case to my team, and I supported him in his defense that he did not, in fact, use cocaine. So the sample went to the lab. It came back positive for cocaine. And I took it personally. I was appalled that he would lie to me. How could he lie to me? My boss was like, listen, the one lesson you need to learn really early on is he was lying to whoever was sitting in your chair. It didn't matter that it was you. It didn't matter if it was me. that's the way this field works. People will lie to you, but if you take it personally, it's not going to go well. So those were the early mentors that I had that really supported me and also encouraged me to be creative. And going from a clinical program, then I worked in a misdemeanor drug court doing entry. It was kind of a local judicial court mandated clients that I had to follow up on, and I had to make sure they were doing what they were doing. And then it kind of expanded to the felony treatment court that I was working with in New York, and really just taking it to a level that I was able to be more creative. And yes, the job was monitoring a lot of people and making sure that they were doing all of the things that they were doing. It was a really strict program, but also being allowed to do some creative work within that and designing the program to empower people rather than to have it be mostly punitive, which sometimes can be the case.
What do you think that you learned from working in drug court that you couldn't have learned in a more traditional clinical setting?
I think that there's so much judgment against mandated programming, and in a sense, it's really not even mandated. People choose in my program. It's a voluntary program. They chose to do this rather than incarceration. But it comes to be that people look at it like, well, they're mandated technically by law to go to treatment in a program they chose, but it's somehow seen as they're not as invested in their recovery as other people. And the irony is, Trey, that's how we got here, is he was brought to the program through legal channels, and that's how we got here. It's a judgment, I think, and people in treatment courts and people on probation, they don't get the respect that many of them should have. And if you remove substances from their arrest history, there generally are no arrests. So if your arrests are fueled by substances, then the common denominator is remove that, and they're able to flourish and thrive and do great things.
You remember about those early interactions with Trey? What stands out?
I remember, like I said when we spoke earlier, I didn't look into his background or his music. I wanted it to be somebody who I had their information and they were coming into the program. Everyone who came into my office, I would say the same thing. When they're in my office for the first time, I would say, nobody wants to be sitting in your seat right now. You're facing a felony charge. You're facing state prison time. Your life is probably not in the greatest place. Your partner, your work, whatever, you're not thriving and doing great stuff when you're sitting in my office. But what do you want to do? Like, the bottom line is this is, a program that's really, it's concentrated, it's very structured. Do you want to do that? And I think what I remember most was he was not a lot different than anyone else, that he was in a really bad place. And, on top of this, you're struggling with an addiction that's really serious. And that's something that it's scary to think, I'm going to have to do all this stuff and do it without drugs and alcohol. I remember him being scared. I remember, meeting him and his wife, and there's a lot, you got a big decision to make here, because he also didn't live near where the program was. He happened to be driving through the county. So the decision was, you will have to move within an hour, because we do daily drug testing, and we don't take the charges that you have here and transfer them to another county. So he had to make some really big decisions, and he moved to the area, which was, separating himself from his wife and daughters. They were able to come and visit, but I know it was, what I remember a lot of was he had to do all of the hard stuff, and it was well worth it. And I know now, obviously, he talks about it being such a positive experience. When he was in it, it wasn't so great, because it seems never ending. And I would say to him, I know this feels like forever, but in a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, it's going to seem like the blink of an eye. And he got that. He understood that.
At what point did your professional relationship evolve into collaborating in a treatment center?
So after he finished the program and, he went on his way back to New York, he was living in Saratoga Springs, and he left Saratoga Springs and moved back to New York City. I got a call from the National Association of Drug Court Professionals, and they asked us to go to DC to talk about drug courts. So I reached out to him and said, hey, they're asking us to go do this. So we went down to DC and we did that. And that's kind of where it started as far as our friendship connection. Sober support, I don't care who you are. If you connect with somebody in a recovery setting, like those are relationships that are fantastic. So we just kind of kept in touch from there. And I didn't go to any fish, I didn't go to fish until after he was done with probation. It was just not my scene, wasn't sure, didn't think it was a great idea. And then it kind of was like, well, why don't you come to SPAC, Saratoga? And so I went to see a show and was like, this is phenomenal. I had, the energy and everything that was going on just blew me away. And we just kept in touch at that point and stayed friends and, sober supports. We all go through stuff in life that's not so great. And we, supported each other through those things. And the idea of a recovery center, I remember I would send him texts being like, hey, when we do at the time I would have said rehab, we're going to do this and this and just kind of weird random stuff. And so the conversation itself happened in 2019 after sound check. We started chatting and, my friends and my significant other was there and Sue was there with him. And we were just talking about, he wanted to do more. And I think when somebody gets to a certain point in their recovery and they say, I give back, I have a commitment, I sponsor people, but I feel like there's more I can do. And on my end, I've been sending people to rehabs and treatment centers, and some of them really weren't great. And I felt like, we could do cool, different stuff. So that was one conversation we had. And then that turned into him having a conversation with his management and saying, hey, is this something we could really do? And within a couple months, they said, yeah, you know what? I think we can look into how we can do this. And the story I tell is that I was driving home from work. This was in the fall of 2019. And I got a text from him that was like, hey, here we go. This is happening. We're going to do this. And I didn't know what he was talking about. And he called and he said, I'm just finished up a conversation with my manager and I think we're going to do this thing and I want you to run it. And then he said, I'm just about to go on stage at Carnegie Hall, but I'll call you tomorrow. And he hung up. And I remember I was in my bedroom in the house I used to live in. And I remember standing there going, I don't know what just happened. Did that actually just happen? And he called the next day and we talked through it. And I was so excited and so pumped for being given this, cool, new, creative opportunity to just help people. The bottom line is we just want to help people get sober. It is that simple in a better way or a grander way or a more creative way. And so that's how we got here.
So when you're kind of in this process of talking about setting up this recovery center, what did you want Divided Sky to offer that you didn't see in existing programs?
So what I saw and heard a lot was that there weren't people, being treated as individuals. It was more of everyone does this, and there's something to be said for taking time out to get to know the person as an individual. And I think that's true in life. And I think that's true in any residential setting. So originally we were going to do the medical model, a clinical program with detox. That didn't work our way. And it came down to, we had some neighbors here who didn't want us here, and we would and this was all, early 2020, March, April, May, June 2020, nothing was moving quickly. So we would go through these Zoom meetings online and it was horrible. And the neighbors that, the ones that didn't want us here the most no longer live here, but they were very angry about what we were doing and we don't want those people here. And the town of Ludlow itself was fantastic. So we would get an approval from the town and then the neighbors would appeal that at the last minute. And then we'd have to wait 6-8 months. So we just kind of said, what can we do? We own the building. What can we do? And the recommendation came that we look at, it's called the Retreat in Wayzata, Minnesota. And they are all 12-step, and it's a residential retreat. It's not a treatment center. So I got connected with the director there, John Curtis, and really I flew out there and I hung out with them for a couple of days. And this was where it felt like the best fit for us, was to be operating as a residential recovery retreat. So the outline of the program, it's daily groups. It's facilitated in a way that's in an educational format rather than a clinical format. But it's still structured, and it's still, there's restrictions on things they can bring in, and it's not a camp, and it's a place where people are treated with respect by not just the staff, but by all the other guests. We look at it as they're guests here. The staff is, we're coming and going. This is where they live for at least a month. And I just love that we can incorporate emotional sobriety in a way that's really prominent, because we have groups that cover it in different ways. We specifically go with Dr. Alan Berger's work on emotional sobriety, which helped me personally. It changed my life in such a positive way. And then I incorporated that with the treatment court participants that I was working with, and they loved it. They felt like this was something that they could connect with. So I hadn't seen that anywhere before. And that's one of the things that we offer people that they won't get elsewhere.
Honey, we talk so much about emotional sobriety here. What is emotional sobriety in your own words?
It's, the beauty of it is it's freedom to me. It helped me to recognize how I was restricting myself from living a better life by taking things personally, by being selfish, by not understanding that everyone is entitled to their perspective, and things aren't always black or white, right or wrong. And it's okay to be accepting of people, even though I may not agree with them. I found Alan's work when it was 2011, and I was going through a really shitty time in my life. And his work helped me to recognize that I was feeling really sorry for myself, and that was not serving me in any capacity. It was not helping me grow. It was not helping me see what I was capable of. And I've told him this story that in the middle of this book, I really had this epiphany where I went, he's saying that I'm the problem. And I was like, okay, because I'm also the solution. That's what we teach our guests is, your thinking patterns of poor me, why does this happen to me, keeps you stuck. And we can work to help you recognize that it's just the opposite. You can use this opportunity to become free from those thoughts and feelings and emotions. If you look at, the 4 agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz talks about taking things personally. Was such a freedom for me. And I could look at it and go, oh, I was really stuck in that faulty thinking for a long time. But it actually, all of this stuff has nothing to do with me. And I felt like it did, or I made it into it being about me. And it's not. And so we can teach people that in a way that helps them grow.
Do you think that is, I know Alan Berger also talks about the 12 steps. Do you think that how do you connect emotional sobriety and the steps?
So it goes back to, Bill Wilson wrote a letter in the Grapevine magazine, and he talked about his problem was his emotional dependencies on things. And in his words, whether it's AA, whether it's people, whether it's work, whether it's relationships, his emotional dependency kept him stuck. And when we remove that, we're free to do as we want and give back and love people regardless of whether they love us. We can give what was freely given to us to, whoever, without expectations of needing to have something returned. He also talks about, and this is, the thing about Alan Berger is he's been sober for 50 plus years and he's a 12-stepper. So he was the one who really kind of pulled apart Bill Wilson's letter and looked at it so in depth. Alan's also a psychotherapist. So I love that stuff. And so it was really intriguing to me to learn it. But he talks about unenforceable rules and the fact that we go out into the world with this idea that I'll only be okay if everything goes the way I want it to go. And the reality is, if we go out into the world with the mindset of I'll be okay even when things don't go my way, we're already ahead of the game. And we see that in other people where it has to be a certain way or else I'm miserable. But if we accept as is, we're much happier. I'm much happier.
I think that's a really, I think that's really great insight. And thank you for connecting Bill Wilson to that as well. That's really important. So music plays a big role in the Divided Sky experience. How do you integrate music into recovery?
We have a rule that there's no fish music here. I will say that. Okay. Besides that, our program manager, Ross Brillhart, is an ethnomusicologist. His PhD is in ethnomusicology. So he has studied music in a lot of different, with Parkinson's patients and with Alzheimer's patients. And the beauty of music is that it resonates with everybody. Everyone connects music in some way, and music can make us dance, and it can make us cry, and it can bring us joy. And that's the beauty of it to me, regardless of people's choice in music. So we do different groups with not just introduce yourself with a song type of thing. It also has to do with sound. And Ross, he received a grant so he could buy singing bowls, and he does sound baths. So music is one piece of it, but there's also sound and how that connects to the human spirit and the human just evolving as people.
That's amazing. That sounds like incredible to have that integrated.
I remember I was reading about the ethnomusicologist. That was really interesting. Yeah. So that may not be how most people see rehab.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
And so what are some misconceptions that people still have you find about what effective treatment looks like?
I think, it goes back to the beauty of what we do is we don't have government grants telling us what we have to do. So that's the cool part of it. And we listen to the guests. And that's always been something that's really important to me, is listening to the people I work with and hearing what they say and going with that. So when it comes to every week, we ask the guests, we have a Friday community meeting, and I sit down with all of them and I say, okay, how was the week? What went great? Which groups did really hit it out of the park? And which groups weren't quite as shiny as they could be? And we're always integrating new things. So if, 15 out of 20 people say we didn't love the ABC group, we're going to look at that and say, well, what can we do? How can we change that or tweak it? Everyone weekly loves the emotional sobriety stuff. So we add to that. We do it in video and we do it in a book reading. And we have a core concept of emotional sobriety every morning where it's pick it out of a hat, and that's the one that gets focused on the most that day. I think it comes down to just paying attention to the people that are here and what do they like, what makes sense to them. The cool thing about emotional sobriety is nobody's telling you you're this. It's for us to figure out. And the empowerment part is what they love about our program.
You have spoken before about joy and recovery, that it's important for recovery, essential to recovery. What does joy-based recovery mean for you?
I think it comes from the beauty of just finding how being in awe of something comes naturally as a sober person. And whether it's, we're very spoiled. We have an amazing view of this, mountain. Every day, people just stand there and go, God, this is beautiful. I mean, that's where joy comes from. Joy comes from within. Pleasure comes from the outside in, but joy is something that it's a gift that I was given in recovery to see the beauty and find gratitude every day.
And what makes the campus in Vermont uniquely healing or aligned with that?
It comes, it's on 18 acres in Ludlow, Vermont. The view is beautiful, but it's also, we're in the forest. The other piece of what we do here too is one of our group facilitators was a forester at one point in his life. So he has studied forest bathing, and we bring our guests outside to do forest bathing. And that's one of those things that it allows people, there's no destination. You're not hiking, you're sitting and you're being kind of enmeshed in the woods and the forest and taking it all in. To me, that's where the joy comes from also, is just being and accepting.
What is a typical day like at Divided Sky?
Our weekdays are full schedule. Their breakfast is at 7. There's the option of them doing morning meditation before that if they want to. After 7 o'clock, we have a morning motivation from 8 to 8:20. And then the groups run like 8:30 to 10. It could be big book study. It could be 12-step study, emotional sobriety, book study, or video. It can be, we also have mindfulness-oriented recovery enhancement, which is called MORE. And what that is a mindfulness practice that came from somebody who's a huge fish fan, Dr. Eric Garland. And he brought it to us very early on, and I jumped on it and was like, I went through the training. It was like, this is fantastic, because it teaches our guests how to work through cravings as they're happening, rather than stuffing them, avoiding them, ignoring them. You sit in them and work through them. And when we can teach people to do that, they come less and less, and we get better at it. And we're more confident of, okay, I know I worked through this last time. I know I'm capable of doing it. And they, as we evolve in sobriety, the cravings become less and less. So on top of those core groups, we also have Monday night, there's an AA meeting on site that was brought in from the community. So we have the guests here doing the AA meeting, and then the local AA members come into the building. Tuesday night, we do an ACA meeting, which I think is really important. Wednesday night is an NA meeting that's hybrid, that's online and in-house. Thursday night, we go out to AA, or there's a video or a Zoom meeting. Friday night's movie night. Friday night's movie night and or fire outside. So the days are full, and then weekends are more. We have spiritualities on Sunday, where we have a local Buddhist monk who comes in and does meditation and also meets with the guests individually. We have a rabbi from a local city who comes in to talk. And then we have another individual who worked with the Franciscan friars come in. So Sunday, there's a spirituality block for anyone who, just learning sometimes the difference between spirituality and religion is an eye-opener.
Love that. And so what role does community and the building friendships and those shared experiences, what role does that play at Divided Sky?
It plays a great role. We have volunteers who are in recovery, who just love what we're doing, and they help us with showing the guests, having a commitment, coming in, setting up the meetings, as well as helping with transportation. We have local people who help us with transportation. They may go pick somebody up at the airport and have that conversation about recovery on the way there, or if they're driving them back to the train station, have that conversation. We have a great group of people who connect with our guests simply because of what we do. They also, if our guests are local, then they're leaving here with somebody who may be their sponsor in a week, dependent on, how they connect.
And speaking of community, I just want to change topics a little bit to the Women's Scholarship Fund, which I know you're really excited about.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about.
Yeah.
What inspired you to launch the Women's Scholarship Fund this year?
We have this amazing woman named Tamara Holder, who is a women's rights attorney. She's also a huge fish fan. We connected really early on, and we talked about women have it harder. Becoming addicted has a huge stigma if you're a woman. There's so many, descriptions that come with that are negative connotations about women once it's women's, a woman who is an alcoholic is, and you can list all these things that people think. And then when there's I want to get sober for a woman, there's a lot more as far as obstacles go in their way with childcare, with working, with just needing to understand that when you get sober as a woman, if you leave your children, that has a whole other connotation with it. Meaning you're putting your children with somebody else's care to get better for yourself, but somehow people see that as a negative. So we know getting sober is harder. We know becoming addicted has its own struggles, but we want to just help women understand that they're worth it. And there's nothing that can stop them if they want it. And so the scholarship fund is to help women who, if just paying was an obstacle, we can take that burden away from them. We also have, specialized women's groups. The Women's Guide to the 12 Steps or the Women's Way to the 12 Steps is one of the groups that I think they absolutely connect with the most. And it's a special way for women to understand that all of the things that come with all the stigma, all the connotations that are negative, we can overcome all of that. And I love that about what we're doing. So we want to help women. And the cool thing is we had one point where our women's beds were full. And one of the women who came in said clearly she had used payment as her excuse to not get sober. And then she saw the women's scholarship and was like, now this is it. I have no excuse now. And she came in and she did great. And she really looked at, lifestyle choices and changes that she needed to make. And like that, to me, that's the beauty of it. That's worth all of it.
How can recovery be made more accessible for mothers specifically?
That's the tough one. And what's heartbreaking is we did have a mom come in, and within a couple of days, she was like, I thought my kids were in a safer place than they are, and she needed to leave. The door's open, please come back. Like, that's how we look at it. I think that, it comes down to women needing to rely on community and family and friends in order to get the help they need. And sometimes that's not there. We do our best, but, visitation when they can bring their kids on weekends, we certainly encourage that. And it's good to have kids running around here too, all for the weekends.
And so what, Melanie, do women need from treatment that they don't often get?
I think that, the studies that I've seen show that women do better with just women's programming. And meaning they don't speak up as much. They don't share as personally in a mixed group. They don't share as intimately. They don't show a lot of, it's scary to show vulnerability in a mixed group for women. So I think that's the thing that people need to understand. It seems as though, from what I've looked into, men do better in those groups, in mixed groups. But it still leaves the women with not being given the same opportunity.
I think that's a really interesting answer. I mean, I can think to myself, even, I think I would feel more comfortable in a women's only group, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think also, we treat, the way I look at it is, take the competition piece between women out of the equation. Just support each other. You don't have to like each other, but supporting each other in recovery is something that we all need to get a good, understanding of. And once that's removed, once we take that out of the equation, a group of women that are in recovery are, that's a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah. Yeah. What is your vision for the Women's Scholarship Fund?
The women, so, besides just fundraising for the scholarships for women, my ultimate goal is to have a separate women's facility. Having the programming mixed for some of it, I think, is beneficial, but having a separate women's facility so that they are communal offsite and can come in for certain groups, to me, is, I think, would be an amazing asset for Divided Sky.
I love that vision. Yeah.
And so, Melanie, after decades in the field, what patterns are you seeing about how people are arriving at treatment today?
That's a good question. I think that one of, the things that I've seen from the beginning, family dynamics have changed a lot. And early on, family's connection was very much tough love and don't talk to them. And my family disowned me. And that's horrible. Like, that's abusive. That's a very difficult arrangement to try to get sober in and feel self-worth when your family is negative and not treating you with any respect. So then the pendulum kind of swung all the way to the other side where it was too much and families were so overly enmeshed or enabling that the person didn't know how to stand on their own 2 feet because everyone did everything for them out of fear of the person, relapsing or dying. So what we're doing is trying to get that right in the middle where we're empowering families. I do the family group on Monday night also, and empowering families to recognize boundaries and enabling. And so that when the guest leaves here, there's a good understanding all around of every person's part in the equation. So I think that, to go back to your question, is the thing I've seen that's changed the most is the family dynamic. But it doesn't matter how the person gets here. It could be, they have to call themselves. So families might be the initiating part of it, but the guest or potential guest does need to do all of the taking accountability, calling us themselves and saying, I need to come there and I want to give.
What sort of habits or practices do you see in people that sustain recovery long-term?
Doing the work, being determined, and having your main priority be recovery. Yeah. That's what I see. Being stubborn, not allowing the outside world to affect how you move and shake through your future.
Yeah. And so I know a big part for me in my recovery was rebuilding trust in myself, and I still work on that. Yes. At Divided Sky, how do you help people rebuild that trust, especially when that shame is so loud in early recovery?
It's kind of like we talk to them about, when you're sober, do you make good decisions? And do you recognize that it's okay to ask for help? When you're at a point where you need help, ask for help. If you're not sure, check with people who you trust. Generally, when people are sober and they make better decisions, that comes with time.
And to wrap up, Melanie, if someone is listening right now and they feel stuck or they're afraid to reach out for help, what would you say to them?
I would say don't ever give up hope. There's hope for everybody. I believe that. And recovery is the greatest gift we give ourselves. It's a lot of work. It's worth every ounce of energy that we put into it. I can't imagine a better life for myself than what recovery has given me. And everybody has that option. Like, it is, nobody cannot do it, I believe.
Thank you. I think that's a great way to end. Thank you for coming, Melanie, and joining us today.
This has been great. It's been wonderful meeting you.
And thank you all for listening to Sisters in Sobriety, and we will see you next week.
This was Sisters in Sobriety.
Thank you for listening and being with us today.
If you want to learn more about sobriety and meet your community, find us at sistersinsobriety.substack.com.
Are you a sister in sobriety? Then reach out on social media. We'd love to hear from you.
If you're feeling generous, leave us 5 stars and a review and follow us wherever you listen.
You'll never miss an episode. Until next time.